So hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm actually talking about the reboot of Mortal Kombat. This is my review for you today. When I was growing up, I actually do remember the release of the 1995 Mortal Kombat movie. Obviously, it didn't have a good follow-up with Mortal Kombat Annihilation in 1997. But one thing I do actually legitimately remember is that the movies were pretty big with the gamers. People were kind of weirded out by the fact that they were PG-13 and not R. The soundtracks were very successful. I actually personally own to this day the Mortal Kombat Annihilation soundtrack. I remember going to Karate America classes when I was younger, and they actually played like songs from the original Mortal Kombat soundtrack during sparring classes and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a pretty, if you were within the right community, whether it's martial arts or gaming, you probably knew what those Mortal Kombat movies were about and what the games they were based on were about too. So in 2021 here, we finally get a reboot of Mortal Kombat. Obviously with Mortal Kombat Annihilation not doing very well in 1997, it kind of took Hollywood a long time to find a proper time to reboot it. Obviously, there's been a lot of games since Annihilation and stuff, so they went with the R-rated reboot this time around. I think that definitely benefited this movie. But let's talk about some positives and negatives, and obviously the plot of this movie too, before I even dive into that. So in this movie, you guys, we actually focus on a character that's not from the games at all. His name is Cole Young, and he's an MMA fighter, and he has this mark on his body somewhere that sorry, my voice is kind of weird today. He has a mark on his body that's some type of a dragon, and apparently some other people around the world have this mark too. And he's trying to figure out what exactly it means. A lot of people are claiming it's some type of an entry to a tournament where the best fighters in the world compete with each other. And so he goes to a place eventually called Outworld, where there's, people that he knows in the real world, kind of demonic figure people that have been around for centuries somehow, and they're still around. That's dealing with, Sub-Zero and Scorpion and things like that. And so basically, the best of the world has to compete in this tournament. Only one can come out alive, first place. And obviously, there's some type of a big prize or something, obviously, for those who do get the first place winning. But because they are the best in the world, and because you basically could fight to the death in this tournament, it's not the most safe tournament to enter. And so basically, throughout the movie, Cole Young encounters characters like Sub-Zero and Scorpion, and characters like Sonya Blade and Jax. Some are, real world people that were born within the last 30 years. Some of them were born over 300 years ago. And so there's all different kinds of people and beings that are competing in this tournament. So it's up to Cole Young and some other fighters that he teams up with throughout the movie to try to win this tournament so that the right person at the right time can win the prize for this tournament. But overall, guys, I thought this new Mortal Kombat movie was okay. I really grew up on that 1995 Mortal Kombat movie. I know a lot of people complain that it was PG-13 and it hasn't aged well and all that other stuff. I actually still really like that movie. I think it's a fun little movie. Obviously, it's not, an Oscar-winning movie, and it's not the best of the 90s or anything like that. But it's still a really fun movie. I think it definitely honors those original Mortal Kombat fighters really well. Puts them in a fun story. We had the whole story with Liu Kang finding out what happened to his brother and kind of his motivation for entering this tournament and things like that. But this time around, there was just so many things that I liked about the film and didn't like about the film that kind of put me in the middle of the road with this new reboot. So let's talk about those positives and negatives for this movie. For my positives of the new Mortal Kombat, any moment that dealt with Sub-Zero or Scorpion was really, really good. The opening of this film alone is very, very well written, well directed. The combat sequences are really good. So anything that dealt with Sub-Zero and Scorpion, specifically when they're interacting with each other or fighting each other, there's just a lot of tension there just because there's a lot of story there too. So we learned right away what exactly would happen to these two guys and why they've been fighting each other for centuries and things like that. And so anytime that Sub-Zero or Scorpion was on screen, they got to do cool fighting sequences. I was totally on board with what the movie was doing. Anything with Sub-Zero and Scorpion was totally A+ in my book here. that goes into my next positive point. I thought the action sequences are really good here. Some have complained about the quick cut editing in this movie. It personally didn't bother me too much. It really was just kind of an editing technique that they chose to use for this movie. Yeah, sure, it would have been cool if they were trained to do, real martial art choreography and things like that, and we could have saw the whole thing happening as they were fighting, and it wasn't, quick cut editing or anything like that. That we could have just watched the fight happen the way it was supposed to happen and things like that. So I thought something like that maybe could have been in this film a little bit more, but for the most part, I thought the action scenes in this movie were really good. I also thought the use of Kano, Sonya, and Jax were also very strong in this movie. Kano actually was a huge comic relief to this movie, so I thought just the way that he handled that with all his one-liners and things like that. So definitely a much stronger use of Kano than the 1995 version. I also really like Sonya Blade in this movie. She's very relatable, very likable, knows how to hold her own, definitely able to hold her own in a fight. Definitely a very likable character in this movie. And then with Jax, once again, we have a lot of fun one-liners. He's definitely the tough guy. He has like a military background more so this time around than he did in those 90s Mortal Kombat movies. So I really like the approach that they took with Jax here. Definitely a fun character to watch. Definitely enjoyed seeing him fight throughout the movie too. There's also, they try to stay true more to the fatalities from the video games in this movie. So they're strong, they're violent, they definitely earn their R rating. So the fatalities in this film I thought were very well done. They're definitely in the spirit of Mortal Kombat where they're violent and the characters, finish them off really well and things like that. So the fatalities in this movie were very violent and very well done in this film. I also like how you can kind of feel the presence of characters even when they're not on screen in this movie. So like, for example, when Sub-Zero is kind of about to enter the scene, the scenery gets really cold and there's snow or there's windows starting to freeze or somebody gets cold or a baby gets cold or something like that. So I like how you can feel the presence of these characters in certain moments in the movie. So like when Cole Young enters the room, you definitely get the presence that you're in the presence of a strong fighter that's going to do something really, really brutal to somebody in the ring in this martial arts fight and things like that. So I like how you can kind of feel the presence of these characters on each and every scene. I thought that aspect of the film was really well done. For the negatives, though, of this new Mortal Kombat, unfortunately, it is kind of a tonal mess. There's scenes that kind of play out like a typical PG-13 action movie. There's scenes that try to more so go for like the fantasy realm kind of thing. There's other scenes that kind of feel more like hard R, cut the head off of somebody kind of thing. So it is kind of a total mess in the sense that it really kind of didn't really know what kind of Mortal Kombat film it wanted to be. There's scenes that suggest kind of a retelling of that 95 Mortal Kombat movie. There's scenes that are kind of hinting toward, let's use this character that's not from the games to kind of introduce everybody to characters that are from the games kind of thing. And then there's the approach of let's make it R-rated, let's make it violent, let's really kind of go for that M-rated feeling that the games are kind of like. And unfortunately, all those kind of tones don't really mesh well together in this movie, unfortunately. So you can kind of tell they're trying to throw everything into the pot this time around, and some of the results, unfortunately, are not very good. I also thought this film would have benefited more from a storyline and more explanation for why certain things are happening. A good example of this is, they say, how Jack survives and gets his robotic arms and things like that, but clearly the people that are taking care of him are not scientists. They clearly don't know anything about robotics. So how come he gets these really high-tech arms that probably came from a laboratory somewhere, and yet these monks in this random destination that probably don't know anything about science are able to kind of equip this onto his arms and figure out how to use them and kind of properly make sure he can know how to use them and things like that. So there's things like that in this movie that just kind of go without explanation. I really thought that really hurt the film, unfortunately. And like I said, I thought this film could have definitely benefited from a storyline, like a stronger one. I also thought the musical score in this film really wasn't anything memorable, because the soundtrack in that 95 movie was really, really strong, really, really good. And unfortunately this time around, the score is just really forgettable. There's really nothing about the score that's really all that memorable in this movie, and so I really wish they could have gone with something that would have stuck in your brain a little bit longer than when the end credit scenes happen. I also didn't understand the benefit as to why they used a character not from the games in this movie. I understand possibly maybe during the screenwriting process, they're like, well, if we use a character that's not from the games and introduce this to characters that are from the games to audiences that maybe don't know about the games very much, then I can kind of understand why they did that. Unfortunately, they don't do that here. I also thought a lot of aspects of Cole Young they just could have applied to a Johnny Cage character or something like that, somebody that actually is from the games that the fans actually know. So I don't understand why this movie that clearly isn't really intended for Mortal Kombat fans that are not really Mortal Kombat fans of the games. So I didn't understand exactly the choice behind that. So I thought that aspect was kind of weak. I thought everything they did with Cole Young could have been applied to Johnny Cage. And obviously, I won't give any spoilers or anything, but how this character ends up is very much a Johnny Cage thing happening to him. I don't get why they went with this character not from the games. I didn't, after seeing the film personally, I don't understand the benefit behind it. I also thought certain characters were just not giving anything to do in this movie. Like some of them just show up just to be in the action sequence and things like that. I thought Goro this time around was very boring. Well, in that first 95 movie, he gets a lot to do. He's very threatening. Clearly, the best of the best are the only people that can beat him in that movie. This time around, he's just kind of the guy that shows up in an action sequence. I also thought Raiden didn't get anything to do in this movie, and he was kind of the mentor figure to Liu Kang in this movie, or in the original '95 movie, he was kind of the mentor figure to Liu Kang in that movie. So in this movie, he's just kind of the teleportation guy, and he's just really not given more to do than that. But overall, I'm going to give this new Mortal Kombat movie a 7.5 out of 10. I think it's okay. I think there's things about it that are good and interesting, but unfortunately, there's certain things like it being a tonal mess, forgettable musical score. I don't know why they went with that Cole Young character. They really just could have used a character from the games. And just certain characters were given nothing to do, like Goro and Raiden. And I thought this film would have benefited more from a stronger storyline and more explanations as to why certain things are happening the way they are. So 7.5 out of 10 for me. This new Mortal Kombat is all right, but there's certain things about it I thought could have been more beneficial, and it was just kind of a missed opportunity in general. So 7.5 out of 10. Go into this with caution. It's not an amazing film, but it's not a terrible film either.